Ghostbusters, young and old, team up to take on a frozen empire that threatens our very existence. But after all this time, does bustin' still feel good? That's the question we're here to answer. What's up, guys? We just saw Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and we're here to talk about it. Nikki, what did you think?
I think the beginning is very good. And I think there were a lot of good ideas that were just, unfortunately, not executed well and underwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, I want to start off by saying that I was a really big fan of Ghostbusters Afterlife, which was definitely felt like a love letter from a son to a parent, like a child to a parent that recently passed. And you could feel a lot of personality and character and vision in that movie that I think is sadly very much lacking from this sequel.
Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Afterlife, I think, is really good. As a follow-up, I know at that point, Ghostbusters didn't have the best track record, but It definitely felt refreshing. And we had some great new characters and performances and ideas in that. And this is definitely a step down.
I love the concept. I love the concept of legacy characters being the family of Spengler, Egon, and it's really weird because that was my favorite dynamic of the previous film. And that feels almost completely lost in this movie.
I think the way they approach a lot of the characters is kind of not only nonsensical, but it's barely there.
It's really weird, right? Because we fell in love with all these characters in the previous film. So instead of like building upon their relationships and their characters, in this movie, we really only focus on Phoebe again, played by McKenna Grace, who's really good in the role. But we kind of lose Finn Wolfhard's character. I can't even remember his name. Trevor, I think?
It is Trevor.
We lose him completely in this sequel to just... He's in the movie for a lot of it.
Yeah.
But he has no arc. He's just kind of there. His arc is he wants to drive the car.
His arc is they start a gag with him wanting...
He's a man.
And he's a man and he wants to be treated like one. And then that kind of goes away immediately.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned that he's in the movie a lot. A lot of characters are actually in the movie a lot, but nothing really happens or is explained.
Another great example is Carrie Coon, who really was, I think, my breakout of the previous film because I really enjoyed her different take on your classic single mother.
Yeah.
She was like rough around the edges. She was a fighter. She was always trying to make something out of nothing. And I really love that. And in this movie, she's just kind of there.
Yeah, I mean, Carrie Coon is still very talented.
Of course,
with what she's given.
Yeah, she tries her very best with what she's given. She's very talented, but she's barely given anything.
It's almost like her arc in Afterlife, which was fantastic and I think really touching. It's like, okay, that's all wrapped up. What do we do with her now?
Yeah, it's really... they kind of just throw that away, and then they kind of introduce something with Paul Rudd's character, Gary Gruberson, where he's like, am I the dad? Am I not the dad? What am I going to do? And Paul Rudd, my God, you can give this man garbage, and he will turn it into gold. And that's what he does here. He is a standout of this film, as usual. He's friggin' Paul Rudd. You don't fud with the Rudd. That's one of my main rules.
Oh, my God. I mean, that's what's so crazy is, with almost anyone else, this dialogue he has would be cringe
Super
AF,
cringe.
But it's so sincere the way he plays it. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's super sincere, and you can't help but love him and feel bad for him.
Yeah. Oh, no, I think his character is still really great. And I think I said this after we saw this, for better or worse, he's definitely stands out more in this movie than I think Afterlife.
Yeah.
Only because he's so much better than everything else around him.
In Afterlife, he was just kind of a supporting character. In this film, he's a main character. Not really. It's so weird.
Again, I think it's like I said, he's in it a lot, but does it mean anything?
The structure of this film, because we really have to talk about structure and the writing of this film, because it feels so weird and jarring and off. It's co-written by Jason Reitman and Gil Keenan, and it just feels like it's all over the place at times.
I'll say this. I actually don't know if I think it's necessarily all over the place. I think it just doesn't know what to focus on at the right...
Well, that's kind of being all over the place.
But I guess what I'm saying is that there's also, like, the stakes are not felt until way later in the film.
Stakes are introduced... threats are introduced, but stakes aren't really felt until the third act. And, into the third act, not even the beginning of the third act.
Yes, it's like maybe the last 20 minutes.
It's really, and that stuff is great. All the stuff with the villain, I can't remember the villain, Barakna?
Something like that.
Granaka? I think it's Granaka. Terrifying villain, really good villain. But basically, unfortunately, if you've seen the trailers, you've pretty much seen a lot of the third act of this film.
Yeah, it's so disappointing because what I was super excited about that I felt that they portrayed in the trailer was a real sense of horror and anxiety. Because the stuff with the ice becoming frozen, having parts of your body like stuck to something, that to me is genuinely like in real life anxiety inducing. And I thought they were going to do maybe some creative things with that. And they do almost nothing. This is as safe as they could have gone. It's
safe, but it's not even safe. I would just say it's very amateurish.
Yeah.
And its delivery. There's one, we sat back, and the opening sequence of this film is so enjoyable.
Yeah.
And so well shot. That leads into a sequence at the firehouse, the iconic Ghostbuster firehouse. That's a oneer.
Yes.
That's really, really good. And we're like, wow, what is everyone talking about? This movie is fantastic. And it's like, immediately after those two scenes, the quality takes a nosedive.
Yeah. Do you know what's wild now that I think about it? They could have just taken the beginning, made it a short film, and be like, hey, this is what they did after Afterlife, the end.
And I would have been happy. And I would have been the happiest boy on the block. It's weird. This movie takes place in New York. The previous film took place in Middle America, rural. It felt unique in that way for a Ghostbusters film. This movie moves us back to Manhattan. I've never seen a movie make Manhattan feel so small.
Oh my god, like
and empty.
In contrast, something like Scream 6, I thought did it beautifully.
Shot in Canada.
Yeah.
And made Canada feel more like New York than this movie did. I don't know what their budget was. It felt like abysmally small. They must have paid so much to have the old Ghostbusters come back that they couldn't afford to have extras in the scene because every street is barren. Yeah. There are barely any cars on the roads. It's New York. It's Manhattan. They're driving to they mentioned downtown. They're on bridges and everything is empty. There's nothing there. Everything is shot so bright and just really square establishing shots of things. Some of the most bland use of New York I've ever seen in film. It had no personality whatsoever. If they didn't tell you they were in New York, it could have just been city, America. It's so weird. And I'm a New Yorker, so I think I'm allowed to have these feelings. It just felt so because Ghostbusters, the first two Ghostbusters films feel very New York. They're a little dirty, a little grimy. They're a little street, and this movie is so polished and clean. Everything is clean, and it just feels like someplace that is not what we're familiar with.
I was gonna say, because you make a great point. Other than one location that kind of plays significance, but still kind of dumb. Otherwise, nothing else besides that and the firehouse have any meaning or any specific connectivity to New York.
For a big budget blockbuster, the sets feel so cheap.
Yeah.
It really feels like a small budget production, and I can't imagine the budget for this is small.
Well, again, this kind of goes back to how great the opening was, because there was there's a pretty big sequence, and I mean, by all means, do they use effects? Obviously, but even then, it's bizarre how the rest of it just doesn't compare and feels very lifeless in comparison.
It's weird, right? We have these characters that we should be focusing on, but this movie introduces so many characters while also bringing back almost every character that had lines from the previous film. Somehow, all of these characters were able to find their way from the middle of America to New York, and it's just it's so jarringly weird that I had to keep looking at you how this person has an internship too. What do they just hand out internships to random people?
I mean, that's what's wild is the fact that you have so many freaking characters. I feel like it's fair to say they all get a pretty decent amount of screen time.
They're all on, in the sense of they're all on screen.
Right, but nothing of much significance happens for the majority of them. And not that I think any of the performances or the characters themselves are inherently terrible.
No.
It just kind of feels empty and I don't understand.
It's very weird. I mean, you have the older cast, and I'm going to be honest with you guys. I really don't see the reason to keep bringing back the original Ghostbusters as much as I love them. Like, they had supporting roles in the first half of this movie, and I loved them in that.
I was gonna say, I think Ray's initial scene was actually pretty fun.
Yeah, Ray's initial scene was fun. Venkman's initial scene was fun. I think Ernie Hudson...
Yeah, Winston, I think, was pretty good.
Was the best of them, because it actually seemed like his character had purpose for being in this movie.
Yeah.
And he I think he's a really good evolution of Winston Zeddemore in this film. But I'm gonna be honest with you guys, like, seeing them suit up and be a part of the final battle, it's like, why?
And that's the biggest thing. Like, without spoiling, you'll see what we mean when we say there's so many characters that I don't understand why they're there at certain points, and
they don't need to be.
Yeah, the impact is very minimal, if that's.
It feels like there's barely any stakes. There's no impact. There's no emotional impact, really. A lot of the emotion falls very flat in scenes.
And what's so disappointing is, because we talked about this at length, I do genuinely feel like I understand what they were trying to accomplish and the stakes they were attempting to give the characters, both externally and on an emotional and at a developmental level.
Yeah.
But my gosh, you don't feel that much for it. I don't feel like.
I agree. You really don't. And it's a shame, because there's some really fun scene-stealing characters in this film. Like, Patton Oswalt is great in the one scene that he's in. Fantastic. Definitely steals his scene. Then they introduced Kamal Nanjiani's character, who I think he's great. Yeah. He is great in everything. And then that's pretty much it.
I was going to say, I think Kumail's character probably gets the most development besides maybe Paul Rudd in this whole movie.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really crazy. It's insane. Like, we have the descendants of Spengler that were given so much emphasis in the previous movie. Yeah. And it's like, here, baton pass. And then they take the baton, and then they just place it gently on the floor, and other characters pick it up. And it's like, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in terms of the story.
I was going to say, I don't even know if it's as much they put it down. They fumble it in their hands.
Yeah, it's like... Because again, like you said, it's a shame, because there's some really interesting story beats in this film. Like, story points that I think would have been fascinating to explore in a movie that focused singularly on them. Yeah. But this movie features, like, 18 different storylines that go nowhere.
Yeah, it's honestly very bizarre, but I think that's what makes it the most disappointing, is that it's underwhelming and had the potential that it didn't reach. And honestly, there are just points where we were kind of bored with it.
Very bored. It's sad. I was in a theater, and I clocked like 6 people scrolling on their phone because they were so bored watching this. And it's really a shame, because that's really the one thing that's unforgivable for a movie to be. Like I said, I think the previous movie was a love letter from a son or a child to their parent who passed away. And I think this movie just felt like kind of like a cash grab.
It's disappointing.
I mean, listen, if you're a fan of Ghostbusters, there's a lot of cool Easter eggs in this movie. There's Easter eggs for all the films prior to this one, as well as the general nostalgia of Ghostbusters, as well as the real Ghostbusters animated series. I'm sure you will find all of those Easter eggs if you watch this. And if you're a fan of Ghostbusters, you may like this film. But if you're a fan of cinema, and if you're a fan of, and if that's what drew you into the original Ghostbusters film, I think you're going to be left disappointed. Yeah. On that note, Nikki, out of 5 Slimers, because I always love Slimer. Got to give it up for Slimer. What do you rank Ghostbusters Frozen Empire?
It's so
Strikes
tough.
Back.
It's so tough, because I don't think this movie is abysmal beyond belief or anything. Underwhelming is the key word here. And I'm going to give it 2 out of 5 Slimers. Interesting.
I mean, I previously said it not too long ago. This film, to me, is the one thing that's unforgivable in a movie, and it's, for a large portion of it, it is boring. And for that, I have to give it a 1.5 Slimers out of 5. Guys, I'm sorry, I enjoyed Madam Web more than this. Madam Web was horrible, but it was memorable, and I was never bored once watching that movie.
Oh, I was gonna say, poor Celeste O'Connor.
Celeste O'Connor's having a rough year. But that's our thoughts on Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Like I said, if you're a fan of Ghostbusters, definitely go check it out. But besides that, wait until it's on demand. If you guys like this video, make sure to give it a huge thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date on all of the latest content. If you want to check out our other reviews and reactions, click the link on the page. And until next time, guys, stay versed.